should not be necessarily conflated with some economic worry, because historically, if you go over time, you will see that economies that are in their high growth phase very often go through a phase of exchange rate weakness. So you go back to, for example, the Japanese before the Plaza Accord. The economy was growing very, very fast, but their exchange rate was kept quite weak. The Chinese had that in the 90s and 2000s till they began to allow the yuan to strengthen. So in itself, it does not mean anything as long as it is not generating domestic inflation, which clearly it is not. If anything, our inflation, one can argue, is too low. So under these circumstances, what is happening is that the rupee is not only gaining from its weakness in terms of the rupee dollar rate. Remember, the dollar itself is not particularly strong right now.
Yeah.
But remember, we have now inflation for the first time that is systematically below world inflation. And our productivity growth is also below, well above world rates. So on all these counts, our real effective exchange rate is very competitive. This gives us the space, not just as in terms of purely export competitiveness in an environment with tariffs and other things. It also gives us the space to begin to remove many of the inefficiencies that tend to accumulate in our trade policy during situations where we are afraid the rupee weakness will cause inflation and so on. For example, the wholesale removal of quality control orders. We have been able to do this because the circumstances are such where the exchange rate allows for us to do this without a fear of a major rush of dumping and other things. So the QCOs basically were introduced at a time when the corporate balance sheets were weak, and we were afraid of this huge dumping. We also had the COVID crisis. Right now, our balance sheets are much better. The quality to price trade-off is better understood by our manufacturers. So, allowing the exchange rate to have come to these levels allows us to remove these inefficiencies. The QCOs are not the most efficient way of managing, dumping type issues. So, I think overall, I am not concerned about the rupee at all.
So you're saying basically you don't need to have dumping duties because the rupee is doing our work, basically.
Yeah, dumping duties is a different issue. I'm talking about specific cases of QCOs. But yeah, some cases the dumping duties may also not be needed, but that depends on the particular item. But what I'm trying to say is that this idea that the exchange rate movement is some award for economic performance, we need to be a little careful about. Because every high growth country in the initial stages of takeoff has had a phase of weak exchange rate. In fact, some people would argue that has been maybe not a sufficient condition, but a necessary condition for the takeoff phase to happen.
We are a capital goods importing country, and the depreciation in rupee, doesn't it hurt us in that sense when we are importing capital goods into the country and in the setting up?
Well, we are also a capital goods producing country. So if there are capital goods that are particularly expensive, then yes. But if there is somebody who can produce it in India, then for that person, this is a good opportunity. Secondly, to the extent that FDI comes in, the rupee value of that each dollar of FDI that comes is now greater. And if that FDI is buying foreign capital goods, well, it continues to be in dollars, so it does not matter. So either which way, I would say, yeah, there are some trade-offs for individual buyers or sellers. But overall, I am not concerned as long as this remains reasonably well contained, smooth, and is not triggering domestic inflation.
One of the reasons which has been stated for the rupee weakness is the foreign outflows which is happening there. Do you think that's a legitimate reason for that? Because from them, for their point of view, if they are bringing more dollars, they can buy more stocks because we haven't moved much from a market's point of view.
So this should be a healthy thing. Why are people putting money into India? So that presumably they make money and take it out. That is the nature of how these markets work. On a gross basis, money is in fact coming in. In fact, we are receiving right now record inflows of money coming in. And just in the last 2-3 weeks, you have had Amazon, Microsoft, Google, all of them announced, just between the three of them, some 75 odd billion dollars of investment. So it's not that money isn't coming in. But yeah, for a while there was a phase where our valuations were very attractive and people thought it was a good place to liquidate and monetize some of their things, which is a good thing, which suggests to us that their investments were successful, and this is precisely what leads to other rounds of investment. I don't think, once we accept a market-based system, we have to accept the cycles that entail it, because that is what leads to the next round of investment. So we should be happy that people are making money.
Is this a new normal from a depreciating rupee point of view? Because in the past we have seen 2 to 3% depreciation in rupee, but this year it has been a little more than that actually.
I am not too concerned because, as I said, the rupee is super competitive and is gaining competitiveness every year, not just from this weakness. We have inflation which is below world inflation, and our productivity growth is higher than what is in the rest of the world. So the rupee is gaining competitiveness on money fronts, which is one of the reasons why our exports are holding up despite these tariffs. So I am not too concerned about it in itself. Now, of course, if the rupee falls at a time where we have pressures, macroeconomic pressures, that's a different situation. But we don't have, excessive external debts to repay. Our debt to GDP ratio is very well maintained. There are no macro pressures. So when there are no macro pressures, the rupee, in fact, if we have ambitions that in the long run the rupee will be a hard currency, then